Have you ever been so underestimated that people literally laughed at your potential? Have you ever wondered what would happen if the person everyone calls dependable and takes for granted suddenly disappeared? What if I told you that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the power? Today's story will show you exactly how devastating it can be when arrogance meets its match. If you're ready for a revenge story that'll make your jaw drop, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more incredible tales of sweet, sweet justice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Hey everyone, I'm Lisa and I'm bringing you another mind-blowing story of workplace justice. I'm here to share the most satisfying revenge stories that'll restore your faith in karma. And today's story? It's absolutely incredible. This is the story of how I built a $700 million empire from my boss's biggest mistake, underestimating me. The conference room fell silent as Fallon's laughter echoed off the glass walls. 23 floors above Manhattan, surrounded by the city's financial elite, I stood frozen as my proposal, 6 months of meticulous research, lay shredded by his dismissive words. June, sweetheart, Greg leaned back in his leather chair, his $1,000 suit straining against his expanding waistline. This is adorable, really. But leave the big boy decisions to the grown-ups, The board members shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Romano, our lead investor, winced visibly. The Pemberton Group's representative actually looked away. These were people who'd trusted me with their billion-dollar portfolios, who called me at midnight when deals went sideways. The Blackstone acquisition could secure our future for the next decade, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. The numbers are cute, Greg interrupted, waving his manicured hand. But I didn't build Fallon Industries by playing it safe with pretty spreadsheets. 7 years. 7 years of being the invisible force behind every major deal, every crisis averted, every relationship salvaged. 7 years of being called Dependable June, while watching lesser minds take credit for my work. Something inside me snapped. But what happened next would change everything neither of us saw coming. That night, I sat in my corner office overlooking the city that never sleeps, my resignation letter glowing on the computer screen. The cursor blinked mockingly at the end of my signature line, as if asking, "Are you sure about this?" My phone buzzed. Patricia Romano. June, what happened in there today was unacceptable. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd built empires from nothing. Greg's getting reckless. The board's starting to ask questions. I smiled grimly. Patricia controlled $180 million in investments through Fallon Industries. If she was concerned, others would be too. Thanks for calling, Patricia. I appreciate your support more than you know. We should talk soon. Off the record. After hanging up, I looked at my reflection in the dark window. 42 years old, Chief Operations Officer of one of New York's most prestigious investment firms, and still being called sweetheart in board meetings. The city sparkled below, full of possibilities and second chances. I hit print on the resignation letter, then opened a new document. If Greg thought I was just another expendable employee, he was about to learn how wrong he could be. Because while he was busy taking credit, I'd been building something he never suspected, loyalty. But first, I had a company to start. You can't be serious. Greg's voice carried across the entire 42nd floor as I placed my resignation letter on his mahogany desk. His morning coffee sat cooling next to a stack of contracts I'd negotiated, deals I'd salvaged, crises I'd prevented. Effective immediately, I said, standing straighter than I had in years. Greg picked up the letter, scanned it, then burst into that same condescending laugh that had haunted my dreams. Oh, June. This is precious. What are you going to do? Start your own firm with what? Your severance package and a dream? Something like that. You'll be back within a month, begging for your old job. He leaned forward, his small eyes glittering with cruel amusement. You're nothing without me, sweetheart. Nothing without this company. I made you what you are. I gathered my personal items from his office, the crystal paperweight from the Pemberton deal, the pen set from our Frankfurt acquisition. Each piece represented a victory he'd claimed but I'd earned. We'll see about that, Greg. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard him call after me, don't come crawling back when reality hits. The elevator doors closed, and I smiled for the first time in months. Greg had no idea that reality was about to hit him like a freight train. My apartment in Soho had never felt more like home than it did that first morning of freedom. While Greg was probably telling everyone how ungrateful June had thrown away her career, I was making the most important phone calls of my professional life. Fletcher, it's June Carter. Fletcher Knox had been my mentor at Columbia Business School, now running his own boutique investment consultancy. If anyone understood the game I was about to play, it was him. June. I heard through the grapevine you might be making some moves. Word traveled fast in our world. Good. I'm starting Carter and Company. I need legal counsel, SEC compliance, and complete discretion. Consider it done. The Pemberton Group's been asking about you, by the way. Something about exploring new partnership opportunities. My heart rate quickened. Patricia had moved faster than I'd expected. Schedule a meeting for next week. But Fletcher, complete discretion. I know. By noon, I had meetings scheduled with 3 law firms, 2 compliance consultants, and a real estate agent who specialized in financial district properties. Of course, full SEC certification would take weeks, but I needed everything in motion today. My phone buzzed constantly, Patricia, the Pemberton Group, even some European investors whose names would make Greg's blood run cold. They weren't calling to congratulate me on my resignation. They were calling because they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The office space on Wall Street wasn't much, 2 rooms, basic furniture, windows that looked directly at Fallon Industries' gleaming tower. Perfect. Carter and Company looked elegant on the frosted glass door. Patricia Romano was my first official visitor, arriving with a leather briefcase and the kind of smile that closed billion-dollar deals. Congratulations on your new venture, June. Thank you. Though I suspect this isn't just a social call. Patricia laughed, the sound genuine and warm, nothing like Greg's hollow cackle. The Romano Fund has been reassessing our investment partnerships. Greg's recent decisions have been concerning. She opened her briefcase, revealing a contract that made my breath catch. $180 million in managed assets, pending your new firm's certification. We're also prepared to recommend you to our network. The Romano Fund's network included pension funds, sovereign wealth managers, and family offices that collectively controlled more money than some small countries' GDP. This wasn't just a client, it was a foundation upon which empires were built. There's one condition, Patricia continued, her expression growing serious. My pulse quickened. In this business, conditions could destroy dreams overnight. Name it. We want exclusive access to your strategies for the first 18 months. No exceptions. I extended my hand. Deal. But as we shook, my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. Greg's calling an emergency staff meeting. Says he has big news. Kylie Fletcher, my former assistant, had always been more loyal to me than to Fallon Industries. Her text included a photo from the conference room, Greg standing at the head of the table, his face red with excitement, presenting what looked like a massive acquisition proposal. "The North Point healthcare deal," I murmured, showing Patricia the image. Patricia's expression darkened. "He wouldn't. That company's hemorrhaging money, everyone in the industry knows it. But Greg would." He'd always been drawn to flashy, high-risk deals that looked impressive in headlines but crumbled under scrutiny. It's why I'd spent 7 years cleaning up his messes, why our investors trusted me to keep him from destroying everything they'd built. My phone rang. Another former client. The Blackstone Group's pension fund manager. "June, we heard about your new firm. We're interested in discussing a transfer of our portfolio management. $95 million. Another domino preparing to fall. "I'd be delighted to meet with you," I said, watching Patricia's eyebrows rise as she overheard the figure. "Excellent. Oh, and June? We've been concerned about some of Greg Fallon's recent investment choices. Your departure has accelerated our timeline for making some changes." As I hung up, Patricia was already on her phone, speaking rapid Italian to what sounded like her European partners. "How many more are waiting to jump ship?" she asked when she finished. "More than Greg could ever imagine." But what I didn't tell her was that the real tsunami was still building. 3 days later, Kylie's intelligence network painted a troubling picture of life inside Fallon Industries. Greg had pushed through the Meridian Healthcare acquisition against the board's explicit reservations, using his majority shareholder status like a sledgehammer. "The analysts are questioning everything," Kylie whispered over coffee in a small cafe 6 blocks from our old office. "Patricia Romano's fund hasn't returned Greg's calls in 2 days. The European accounts are asking for portfolio reviews. And Greg? Furious. He's been screaming at everyone, demanding to know who's been talking to you. He thinks someone's sabotaging him from the inside." I almost felt sorry for him. Greg had always believed his success came from his own brilliance, never understanding that I'd been the invisible hand preventing his worst impulses from destroying everything. Now, without that protection, his true judgment was finally being exposed. My phone buzzed, another investment firm requesting a meeting. The Steinberg Group? Kylie's eyes widened as she read over my shoulder. "They're worth $150 million alone. They were never really Greg's clients," I explained. "They were mine. I just let him think otherwise." But as we talked, a familiar figure passed by the cafe window. Patterson, Greg's hastily promoted temporary replacement, my supposed successor. He was on his phone, gesticulating wildly, clearly in crisis mode. Something big was happening at Fallon Industries. Something that would change the game entirely. The Wall Street Journal article appeared on Thursday morning, buried on page 6 of the business section. Fallon Industries faces investor exodus amid leadership questions. Greg's response was swift and predictable. He called it fake news and desperate attempts by competitors to undermine our success. But the damage was already done. In the investment world, perception was reality, and the perception was that Fallon Industries was hemorrhaging money and credibility. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. The Blackstone Group had officially moved their $95 million portfolio to Carter & Company. The Steinberg Group followed with $150 million. 2 smaller pension funds brought another $40 million combined. $465 million in 1 week, I told Fletcher Knox as he reviewed our compliance paperwork. And we're not even officially operational yet. Greg must be going insane. He's about to get worse news. The morning's email had brought a request that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. The Pemberton Group wanted to discuss transferring their entire $220 million relationship away from Fallon Industries. But as I prepared for that meeting, my computer chimed with an urgent message from Kylie. Emergency board meeting called for this afternoon. Greg scrambling. Word is the Meridian deal is already showing massive losses. I leaned back in my chair, looking across the street at the Fallon Industries tower. From my window, I could see Greg's office, where he was probably pacing like a caged animal, trying to figure out how his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. He still had no idea the worst was yet to come. The Pemberton Group's offices occupied 3 floors of a glass house on Madison Avenue, a monument to old money and older power. Catherine Pemberton herself, granddaughter of the firm's founder, sat across from me in a conference room that had hosted presidents and prime ministers. Ms. Carter, I'll be direct. The Pemberton Group has managed our relationship with Fallon Industries for 8 years, primarily because of your oversight and strategic guidance. I appreciate your confidence, Mrs. Pemberton. Without you there, frankly, we're concerned about Mr. Fallon's decision-making. The Meridian Healthcare acquisition, for instance, we explicitly advised against it. And yet he proceeded. Against our unanimous recommendation, yes. Elizabeth's expression hardened. We're prepared to transfer our complete portfolio to Carter & Company. $220 million in managed assets, plus exclusive consultation rights for our European expansion. My hands remained steady as I signed the agreement, but inside, I was calculating the total, $685 million in less than 2 weeks. Greg had built his empire over 15 years. I was dismantling it in 14 days. But as I left the Pemberton building, my phone rang with news that changed everything. June, it's Patricia. Turn on CNBC. Now. I ducked into a nearby cafe, where the financial news was playing on every screen. The headline made my blood run cold, breaking. Sources confirm Fallon Industries under SEC investigation for potential securities violations. Greg hadn't just lost his judgment, he'd lost his mind entirely. And now the perfect storm was about to make landfall. The SEC investigation centered on the Meridian Healthcare deal, specifically, whether Greg had disclosed material information about the company's financial instability to investors. From my coffee shop perch, I watched CNBC's cameras gathering outside the Fallon Industries building like vultures circling wounded prey. My phone buzzed constantly. Every major financial publication wanted quotes. Every investor wanted reassurance. Every competitor smelled blood in the water. But the call that mattered came from an unexpected source. June, it's Tom Patterson. Greg's replacement sounded exhausted, defeated. I need to talk to you. Off the record. Patterson and I met in Central Park, away from the cameras and chaos. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Greg's lost it completely, Patterson said without preamble. He's convinced you're orchestrating some kind of corporate espionage campaign. He's hired private investigators to dig into your client relationships. And what did they find? Nothing illegal. Everything you did was completely above board. You built genuine relationships over years of excellent service. But Greg can't accept that. He thinks there's some conspiracy. Patterson handed me a manila envelope. He's planning something desperate. A hostile takeover of Blackstone's pension fund management. He thinks if he can force them back into his portfolio, it'll stop the bleeding. I opened the envelope. Greg's plan was as audacious as it was stupid. He was leveraging Fallon Industries' remaining assets to fund a takeover that would either save his company or destroy it completely. Tom, why are you telling me this? Because I have 3 kids and a mortgage. And because Greg's about to make a move that'll destroy everyone who stays loyal to him. As I walked home, one thought echoed in my mind. Greg was finally going to hang himself with his own rope. The emergency board meeting at Fallon Industries lasted 4 hours. I knew because Kylie had positioned herself in the lobby cafe with a clear view of the executive elevator, counting directors as they arrived looking grim and left looking furious. James Montgomery came out first, she reported over dinner. He's been on the board for 12 years, never seen him look that angry. Then Patricia Romano, she didn't even acknowledge the security guard on her way out. Patricia had officially remained on Fallon's board even after moving her fund to Carter and Company, claiming she wanted to help guide the company through its transition. In reality, she was gathering intelligence about Greg's increasingly erratic behavior. And Greg? Still up there. Lights are on in his office, but the blinds are drawn. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, "We need to talk. Tonight." It's worse than we thought. An hour later, Patricia sat in my apartment with a glass of wine she hadn't touched, her usually perfect composure cracked with exhaustion. "The SEC investigation isn't just about Meridian Healthcare," she said quietly. "They're looking into 3 other deals from the past 18 months. Deals where Greg overrode your recommendations and proceeded anyway." "How bad?" "Potential criminal charges bad. Wire fraud, securities violations, possibly conspiracy if they can prove he knowingly misled investors." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air outside. "Patricia, I never intended, this isn't your fault, June. Greg did this to himself. You just stopped being there to catch him when he fell." But as she left, Patricia's final words haunted me, "There's something else. The board's discussing removing Greg as CEO. They want you to come back." The irony was almost perfect. The phone call came at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. James Montgomery, chairman of Fallon Industries board, sounded like he'd been awake all night. "June, I'll cut straight to the point. The board is prepared to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer of Fallon Industries, effective immediately." I nearly dropped my coffee. "James, we know about Carter and Company. We know about the client transfers. Frankly, we're impressed by your speed and efficiency. You've proven you can build something from nothing. What about Greg? Greg will be stepping down to focus on the SEC investigation and his personal legal matters. The board has lost confidence in his leadership." The offer was everything I'd never dared to dream: full control of Fallon Industries, a $2 million salary increase, equity participation, and complete operational authority. I could merge Carter and Company into Fallon's infrastructure, combining my new client relationships with the old firm's resources. "I need time to consider, 24 hours, June. The SEC investigation is accelerating, and we need strong leadership to navigate this crisis. Frankly, we'd rather have you on our side than against us." After hanging up, I walked to my window overlooking Wall Street. From here, I could see both the Fallon Industries tower and my small Carter and Company office. 2 paths diverged before me: return as the conquering hero to save the company that had diminished me, or continue building something entirely my own. But as I weighed my options, my computer chimed with an email that changed everything yet again. The subject line made my blood freeze: June Carter, confidential investigation results. Greg had found something. The investigator's report landed in my inbox like a digital bomb. 47 pages of desperate fishing expedition that found nothing illegal but plenty that could be twisted into scandal. Greg had hired former FBI agents to examine every client conversation, every business lunch, every professional relationship I'd built over 7 years. The smoking gun he thought he'd found? A series of dinners with clients in the 6 months before my resignation, meetings Greg characterized as evidence of premeditated client theft and corporate espionage. My phone rang within minutes of receiving the report. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Greg's voice carried a manic edge I'd never heard before. You've been planning this for months, maybe years. Building your little conspiracy, stealing my clients. Greg, those were legitimate business relationships. I'm sending this report to the SEC, to every financial publication in the city, and to the Carter & Company Compliance Board. Your new firm will be destroyed before it officially opens. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. His voice turned cold, calculating. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to shut down Carter & Company, return my clients, and come back to work for me. As a junior associate. With a 50% pay cut. And if I refuse? Your reputation will be destroyed. No one in this industry will ever trust you again. The line went dead, leaving me staring at a report that painted 7 years of professional excellence as criminal conspiracy. But Greg had made one crucial error. He'd underestimated exactly how many people were watching this fight. And how many of them wanted him to lose. Within hours of Greg's threat, my phone became a weapon of mass destruction pointed directly at his crumbling empire. The investigator's report, which Greg had sent to financial journalists hoping to destroy my reputation, had spectacularly backfired. This is the most desperate thing I've seen in 20 years of covering Wall Street, laughed Michael Brooks from the Financial Times. Hiring private investigators to prove that a former employee had business lunches with clients? The man sounds completely unhinged. The Wall Street Journal was less amused. Their headline the next morning read: Fallon Industries CEO under fire for harassment campaign against former employee. But the real damage came from Greg's own board members. Patricia Romano called an emergency meeting, armed with copies of the investigator's report and a recording of Greg's threatening phone call that I'd legally captured in my one-party consent state. This crosses every line of professional conduct. James Montgomery's voice shook with barely controlled rage during our conference call. Threatening former employees, hiring investigators, attempting to sabotage a legitimate business venture. The board is voting tonight, Patricia added. Greg's termination is now a certainty. By afternoon, the story had spread beyond financial circles. CNBC ran a segment called, When CEOs Attack, The Dark Side of Corporate Revenge. Bloomberg published an analysis piece titled, How Greg Fallon Lost $700 Million and His Mind. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. The SEC investigators themselves reached out to me directly. Ms. Carter, we'd like to discuss your experiences at Fallon Industries. Particularly regarding any attempts to influence or intimidate witnesses. Greg hadn't just destroyed his reputation, he'd handed federal investigators evidence of potential witness tampering. The Fallon Industries boardroom had never felt more like a courthouse. 8 directors sat around the mahogany table that had witnessed 15 years of Greg's reign, their faces carved from stone. Greg himself sat at the far end, his expensive suit wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. I attended via video conference from Carter & Company, a decision that felt perfectly symbolic. On my screen, I could see Patricia Romano presenting the board's findings while Greg stared at his phone, either in denial or plotting his next desperate move. The board has concluded that Greg Fallon's recent actions constitute gross misconduct and a fundamental breach of his fiduciary duties. James Montgomery's voice carried the weight of absolute finality. Effective immediately, Mr. Fallon is terminated as Chief Executive Officer and removed from all leadership positions within Fallon Industries. Greg looked up from his phone, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally, a kind of broken confusion. You can't do this. I built this company. I made all of you rich. You built this company with June Carter holding it together, Patricia's voice cut through his protests like a blade. Without her, you've proven you're incapable of basic judgment. The vote was unanimous, 8-0, with Greg's own shares insufficient to override the board's decision. But as the meeting concluded, Greg stood up, straightened his tie, and looked directly into the camera at me. This isn't over, June. You think you've won, but I'll destroy everything you've built. Count on it. The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark monitor. Greg Fallon had finally revealed his true nature to the world. The final accounting came on a Thursday morning that would reshape the entire financial district's understanding of power, loyalty, and the price of arrogance. Patricia Romano sat across from me in Carter and Company's conference room, now expanded to occupy an entire floor, with documents that told the complete story of Greg's downfall. Total assets under management transferred to Carter and Company, she read from the final audit report. $697.3 million. The number hung in the air like a benediction. In 6 weeks, I had built a firm managing nearly $750 million, all of it transferred from Fallon Industries by clients who had been working with me, not Greg, for years. The Pemberton Group alone represents $220 million, Patricia continued. The Romano Fund, $180 million. Blackstone Pension Management, $95 million. Add in the Steinberg Group, the European accounts, the smaller pension funds. What's left at Fallon Industries? $143 million in assets, mostly tied up in the Meridian Healthcare disaster and 2 other failing investments Greg made against board recommendations. The company is technically solvent, but barely. The irony was perfect. Greg had spent 15 years believing he was the genius behind Fallon Industries' success, never understanding that I had been the invisible foundation holding his empire together. Remove that foundation, and the entire structure collapsed under its own weight. There's one more thing, Patricia said, sliding a final document across the table. The new board of Fallon Industries has voted to liquidate the company and distribute remaining assets to shareholders. Greg's life's work would be dissolved within 90 days. But the sweetest revenge was still coming. The bankruptcy auction of Fallon Industries took place on a cold December morning in a downtown courthouse that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless corporate empires. Greg sat in the front row, his face a mask of grim determination. He'd told reporters he had to see it for himself, watching 15 years of his life reduced to line items in an auctioneer's catalog. I attended not as a bidder, but as a witness to the final chapter of a story that had begun with him calling me sweetheart in a conference room that now belonged to someone else. Lot 47, executive furniture from the 42nd floor, including mahogany conference table and 12 leather chairs. The same table where Greg had dismissed my Blackstone proposal. The same chairs where board members had watched him destroy everything they'd built together. Lot 52. Office artwork and decorations, including crystal awards and commemorative pieces. I recognized some of those pieces, awards for deals I'd negotiated, commemorations of successes I'd engineered while Greg took credit and cameras. When the auction ended, Greg walked over to where I stood in the hallway, his face a mask of exhausted defeat. "Are you happy now?" he asked quietly. "I'm not unhappy," I replied honestly. "But I didn't do this to you, Greg. You did it to yourself. I gave you everything. I made your career. You gave me a job. I made my own career." As he walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt something I hadn't expected, pity. Greg had never understood that success built on diminishing others is ultimately hollow, that loyalty earned through respect lasts longer than loyalty enforced through fear. But the final twist was waiting for me back at Carter and Company. An envelope with my name, marked confidential. The letter inside the envelope was handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind Greg had always used for his most important communications. But the words were unlike anything he'd ever written to me before. June, I've had 6 months to think about what happened, and I finally understand something I should have realized years ago. You were never working for me. I was working for you, and I was too arrogant to see it. The clients didn't follow you because you poached them. They followed you because you earned their trust through 7 years of excellence while I was taking credit for your work. The board didn't fire me because you orchestrated some conspiracy. They fired me because, without you there to save me from my own bad decisions, they finally saw who I really was. You didn't destroy Fallon Industries. You simply stopped holding it together. I'm writing this from my lawyer's office, where I'm finalizing the paperwork for my move to Denver. My brother has offered me a position in his real estate company, junior associate level, which feels appropriate given my actual skill set. I owe you an apology that's 7 years overdue. I'm sorry for every time I called you, sweetheart, for every credit I stole, for every moment I made you feel small when you were actually the biggest person in every room. You didn't just outplay me, June. You taught me something about leadership, respect, and the difference between being in charge and being a leader. Congratulations on your success. You earned every dollar of it. Respectfully, Greg Fallon. I set the letter down and walked to my office window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline that had witnessed our entire drama unfold. Carter & Company now managed $847 million in assets, employed 32 people, and had been featured on the cover of Forbes as the fastest-growing investment firm in Wall Street history. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, board meeting in 10 minutes. The Singapore expansion proposal is ready for your review. 7 years ago, I was the dependable June, the woman who fixed problems and got no credit. Today, I was June Carter, CEO of my own empire, built not through destruction but through respect, relationships, and the simple revolutionary idea that people follow leaders they trust. Greg had laughed when I resigned. But I was the one having the last laugh now. So there you have it, the story of how underestimating the quiet one cost Greg Fallon everything he'd built, and gave me everything I'd earned. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about finally building the success you deserved all along. What did you think of June's journey from sweetheart to CEO? Have you ever been underestimated like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Drop your own stories of workplace revenge or times you proved the doubters wrong. If this story gave you the satisfaction you were craving, smash that like button to let me know. And if you want more jaw-dropping revenge stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Your support means everything, and trust me, I've got more incredible tales of justice served cold coming your way. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be planning their empire while you're busy taking credit.